Thanks, Dave. And just to check the box, since this is an IEEE conference, in 1984 at Clemson University, I was the managing editor of the IEEE magazine for Clemson. So I checked it. So yesterday and today, y'all have heard a lot of different speakers speak on the bits and bytes and how to transmit and what's the best thing to do with your antennas and the different aspects. So the focus of what I want to talk to you about today is, how do you make money at this? What's the, the business impact of moving to next-gen TV or ATSC 3.0? I did have a boss one time that used to get up, change my slides around, add new slides, and then say, okay, go. So I am used to going, okay, what do I want to talk about next? So I'll make do. Over the next 10 years, TV as we know it is going to evolve dramatically. I like to give an analogy. If you sort of think about how we all did our business and how we managed working together before cell phones or before smartphones. It used to be you would read on stuff, you'd research, then you'd get in your car, get in the train, go to the office, and there was all of this downtime. And when you went home, you could pick up and talk to somebody on a landline, you could plan things. But if you compare that to how we do business today, how we stay connected, literally half the audience there, you don't go 5 minutes, including myself, without looking down, being able to answer a quick question. The collaboration that you have with the people you're working with your customers, is tremendously different. If you tried to plan how you would do business 15 years ago before seeing this come about, you wouldn't recognize it. Well, that's the same thing that's going to occur with TV. How you see it today will be completely different. For people like myself, I have 3 daughters. Sometimes that's really good. Sometimes that's, a dinner where everybody's sitting there doing this. But mostly, it's really good. So next-gen TV represents an innovative way to actually support that evolution. In doing that, it does that in multiple ways. Number one, it provides all IP, hybrid, broadcast, and broadband services. So compared to a traditional broadcast-only environment, the types of capabilities and things you can do with that broadband connection and the feedback loop, as Mark was explaining earlier from Trevini, makes new business models work in new ways, and you can really achieve new things. The support for Ultra HD, and that's not just UHD and 4K, that's with HDR, higher dynamic range. That's with support for wider color gamut. That is with support for higher frame rate, up to 120 frames per second. And you can get that not only on the big 4K display that you've bought at home, you can get that anywhere you can support that, even on your phone or your mobile devices. More efficient and effective video distribution models. So this does not just limit itself to the fact that we're moving to something like HEVC encoding, where I can take a lot more content and put it in a lot less bits at a very high quality. It's also the method of distributing it, and I'll get into some of the examples of that. And then more content via multiple streams, as Mark was pointing out earlier, on the ability to dynamically add new streams and spin up new content, localized content tailored to specific DMAs, or all the way down to a particular client or device, depending on the method of distribution. Interactivity. If you think about how you watch TV today, or even how your kids watch TV today, so great, they may be watching it on their computer or their laptop or their iPad, but if you start getting into the interactive nature of it, now all the way back to how content is produced and being able to interact with, hey, I want the ending to go this way or that way. It's going to be much more immersive. If you're like me, when you start getting into some of that feedback loop so I know more about the end customer and exactly what he's doing. So if I skip the privacy thing that other people are concerned about, and I know that this guy likes Coke, that next scene may have Coke sitting on the table, and this guy over here may have Pepsi because that's what he favors. There's all sorts of things that may change that this type of technology will support. The addressable advertising and content. So the fact that we can tailor content and advertising to a very small hyper-local area. So even with the overlays on a broadcast method, you can get down to a more localized area, but when you start taking into account the OTT distribution and being able to potentially get all the way down to that particular device, that particular person, regardless of whether he's looking at, it allows you to be able to monetize that capability even more. And then, of course, adding new ancillary service capabilities to drive even new business models. So whether that's being able to, as he was demonstrating before, communicate with autos as they're driving down the road, interfacing with the Internet of Things, IoT, downloading new firmware in the background, the fact that we can mix and match real-time content distribution and data distribution along with non-real-time gives you the capability to do many, many new things. So if we look at some of the things that Imagine has done over the last few years with Sinclair, we did a sandbox project that was essentially tailored to help define next-gen TV. So it included testing new business models, and yes, that included new advertising models as well. Of course, support for multi-platform traffic, different methods of data delivery, IP and UHD content, as opposed to just SD and HD, and then doing it all over a unified distribution method, which I will actually give you a graph of in a minute and explain more. The thing that was really nice was combining the IP and knowledge from Imagine personnel that have been involved with setting the standards and coming up with the standards and developing products for those standards, with the knowledge base of Sinclair, who is one of the largest TV broadcast support groups with the experience on delivering high quality, high applicable content to different audiences nationwide. We were able to actually drive and develop a complete end-to-end solution for multi-platform traffic, IP and content playout, and do it over a unified distribution. So if we look at sort of the 50,000 foot of what we were able to do on the creation side, IP-based production and contribution. So this is not just one piece of the end-to-end solution. This was IP from beginning to end. So all the way from the origin server playing out the content through encoding and transcoding and video switching and mixing and audio mixing, branding, demuxing and muxing and audio shuffling. Every part of the creation process was done based on an IP solution. And then the corollary to that, of course, is the cloud and virtualized playout, being able to actually play this out, whether it's on common off-the-shelf hardware, an appliance, or up in the cloud, or any hybrid nature of that. We also did that. If you look at what we were testing on the monetization part, the focus was obviously taking advantage of ATSC 3.0's ability to provide hyper-localized and impression-based advertising tailored to a very small localized area, and be able to monetize that and take advantage of more opportunities to make money by doing that in different regions. And then on the distribution side, of course, it was support for multi-platform and mobile. So obviously one of the main aspects and the reason that we're talking about the business impacts is how do you actually make money at that? Well, one of the main things that we were able to achieve is actually providing a common management of all of the content and inventory, regardless of the different selling models. So if you look at it, it didn't matter whether you were selling impressions to achieve a fixed CPM or CPT in this particular case, or selling spots traditionally, like I want the first spot on the halftime show of the Super Bowl for X number of tens of millions of dollars, or whether I'm selling non-linear targeted to web or VOD type applications. Being able to provide a common traffic schedule and the return path billing across all of those different selling models in a consistent fashion was key to this, and provides the capability to do so with less overhead. Infinitely better than the currently, I believe one of the previous speakers talked about the silos, because that is exactly how most of this is implemented today. If you looked at the different selling models, most people's OTT and multi-screen interface is a completely separate system from what they're doing on the linear side. So being able to tie that together was a key element, and something that's supported by the next gen TV. When we start looking at the native IP contribution, the flexibility you get moving to IP is tremendous. I truly don't care, as I've moved a lot of the services to software and I'm running them and they're communicating over IP. It doesn't matter whether that same service or an adjacent service is running on the same instance, on the same blade, on different PCs, different racks, different buildings, or halfway across the world. The method of designing my system and communicating between these services is exactly the same. So you have an unbelievable amount of flexibility in how you design and architect your system now. The support for multi-format data and communications over the same network communications is phenomenal. So now it doesn't matter whether it's HD or UHD, whether it's compressed signals or uncompressed signals. It could be 2022-6, it could be SMPTE 2110. It doesn't matter, you can mix and match, and you can do control and management all over that same. You can mix real-time content delivery with non-real-time data over the same network communications. And then now that we've sort of virtualized a lot of that software, being able to run them on common off-the-shelf IT hardware, so the same compute, network, and storage infrastructure for all the different services. If you went back about even 5 years ago, building an end-to-end solution would have consisted of 40 different appliances from 20 different vendors. If you wanted redundancy on those, you would have needed to purchase 80 different devices or appliances from those same. If you wanted spare power supplies and controllers, you would have had to purchase that for each of those devices. You would have to train your operators and your maintenance personnel on every one of those, on how to configure them, how to operate them, and how to work together. The fact that you can now run all of these services that have been virtualized on the same common hardware is a tremendous operational savings. And it can save you on your implementation of redundancy as well, because instead of doing N times 2 redundancy on every step of the way, you can do N+1, because I could really spin up, some time of the day I could have 12 of these services and one of these. Later on in the day I may have one of these and 12 of these. You can spin them up as needed. So it gives you a lot more flexibility, and it saves you an operational overhead and cost. Obviously, the move to software media processes. So being able to do all of the things that used to take dedicated appliances or hardware in software gives you the capability to move that. Virtualizing them and designing them so that you can run them in the cloud allows you to, you can run them on an appliance, you can run them on COTS-based hardware, or you can run them up in the cloud, or any combination of a hybrid cloud environment. So the flexibility you get with IP is tremendous. If you look at being able to provide scalable playout to support localized content. So being able to spin up the same content and rebrand it for a very localized area, now I can monetize that same content in multiple ways and make more money with the same content. Being able to do that, I of course could build a production facility that had enough hardware and had enough capability to go to every possible client and device and localized area that I'm distributing to, or build multiple production facilities to do that. Or I could start spinning some of those up in the cloud. A lot of people are still scared of the cloud, but you should know there are broadcasters that are actually running on air today with content running out of the cloud already. So it is here and it will become prevalent. If you start thinking of some of the advantages you get by being able to do that, even if you're a little scared of it, what a lot of people are doing is they're doing their disaster recovery in the cloud rather than putting that investment in. If you start looking at your operational cost, if I have 6 hours of programming a day in the cloud, I could spin that up 5 minutes before, run it for 6 hours, tear it down. I'm only paying for those 6 hours of usage. So now I can start looking at a comparison of traditional CapEx type investments versus an OpEx. So your business models are completely different. If you start looking at redundancy methods, if I want a hot standby, I can spin up 2 instances, in which case I'm paying for twice, but now I have instantaneous transfer from one to the other. If I want to pay for a cold standby, now I might, depending on who you're talking to and how it's going about, I might not have to pay for that at all, and I only spin it up if I need it, in which case there's a slight delay between switchover, but now I don't have to pay for that at all. So there's all sorts of new business models that you're able to do based on the new technologies. And the move to IP and the move to the next gen TV supports these. So if we actually look at an example of the unified distribution system that we worked out with Sinclair and that we have as a generic. Traditional linear-based channel, you can transcode it, you can run it into your packager, obviously convert everything to file segments, put it into your dynamic ad insertion, and do your distribution for your OTT or your screen, much like most people are doing in a first step toward OTT or multi-screen. But the quality you're able to achieve now using those methods, using the IP distribution, using the existing network, and using the actual final distribution, you can actually use that same method to actually send that out your traditional over-the-air broadcast or satellite or cable broadcast as well. So I can take those same file segments, send it to an HTTP to UDP gateway, convert that back into a QAM MUX and send it out my cable network. I can send it to my ATSC 1.0 exciter and send it out that. For ATSC 3.0, I can send it to my real-time route encoder from companies like Trevini, send it to my ATSC 3.0 framer and scheduler from companies like Inesys or others, and then send it out over the air. The thing that's amazing is now with one common method from end to end, I now have the capability to reach absolutely any of my audience over any possible method, over any possible device. And when I'm trying to monetize that, my ability to add advertising or pick particular localized contents for a particular area, whether advertising or content, I do in a consistent fashion across every one of my different distribution methods, as opposed to having different silos for every one of those and having to manage that in a different fashion. And as we start taking the feedback mechanism, we talked about getting the different measurements back. There are all sorts of different informations coming back. So whether that's Nielsen type data on your traditional over the air, or whether that's data from that particular device and that particular user and what kind of Google search he did and it's coming back, you can take that localized information, send it into your placement opportunity information service or our POISE service, to actually determine what is the best content to send to these particular streams for these particular types of distributions or clients. I can then send that to my ad decision service engine, and now I can pick, great, for this particular client on this particular device using this particular distribution, these are the ads that I want to put into that. And then send that to my ADS router and choose the right segments and just replace the different segments as appropriate for each individual stream. Once again, a unified method of being able to monetize and sell content and localized advertising and content across any distribution method, something that was not possible with the previous methods. So if we look at sort of what's next, the first bullet there, I will admit that if you go to Sinclair's website, that is their tagline, but it's a perfect tagline here. Connecting people with content everywhere. So obviously the goal is to maximize the assets and reach of broadcasters to transform and expand their business by providing advertisers the ability to reach targeted audiences, in this case, much more targeted audiences, using new methods of distribution and new measurement techniques, many of which you've heard about today. The other is delivering data and content that is local and personal over a path that makes the most sense. So as we move forward, whether I'm looking at it on my phone, my iPad, my TV, getting the content that is tailored to me, the advertising that is tailored to me as I move from one to the other is what we're looking at. And then the other is providing an enhanced public services by using the targeting capabilities of ATSC 3.0. I happen to be from Alabama, so pretty much any day in the summer, there's a tornado within 100 miles of me. So if I'm looking at the emergency alert system and the existing system, it's going off almost every afternoon. You can imagine that a lot of people, unless they live in a mobile home in Alabama, are not paying attention anymore because it's not localized enough. With the enhancements for ATSC 3.0, not only can it target the fact that that tornado is on Elm Street and I'm only going to send it to them, I can send rich media data, video, audio that is pertinent to whatever is going on that didn't occur before, as opposed to just a text message. So you have the capabilities to be much more effective, and that's a powerful addition to the next gen TV as well. With that, I thank you very much.